Hi everybody, this is Jerry Dean from Missing Persons of America. I'm going to go over the story of Stephen Koecher. He went missing back in 2009. Surveillance video caught him getting out of the car and he hasn't been seen since. It's coming up next. So Stephen Koecher, he was 39 years old when he was last seen in 2009. Stephen was a native Texan and he lived in St. George. He had just recently moved there. When Stephen Koecher moved to St. George, it was during the time of the recession, and he quit his job, went to St. George, so he now had to get a new job, and he found one passing out flyers for a window washing company. Now, that was working great and everything, but it just wasn't enough money to help him pay the rent. So he was coming up short. He was paying as much as he could, but he was falling behind more and more every month. And it got to the point that the landlord turned around and called his parents and said he was behind on the rent. Well, of course, his parents talked to him about it, and Stephen was agitated that it was brought up, agitated that the landlord even called his parents because he felt it was his responsibility. And he assured them that everything was fine, there was nothing to worry about, and he was doing okay. That was the end of that conversation. So in December, it seemed as though Stephen had decided to go on a trip. Now, nobody would probably have known anything about this if it wasn't for the fact that at the end of the trip, he ended up going missing. But they went back and they followed everywhere that he went by using his cell phone. And what they found is he had traveled like 1,200 miles over a couple of days. So let me tell you a couple of the places that he went. So it was December 9th. He visited some friends that he knew in Ruby Valley. I believe it was an ex-girlfriend of his, and he visited their parents, just catch up on what was going on. And that was Ruby Valley, Nevada. Then he made a withdrawal at an ATM in Wendover, Nevada. Got some gas on December 10th. And then he went to Springville, Utah, and got lunch in Nephi, Utah. And you can see the maps, and I kind of went around, and you see him going up and going to Ruby Valley and then turning around and going back home. Then on December 12th, he stopped in Mesquite, Nevada, and he purchased some gasoline, and he also bought some Christmas presents. Now, during this trip he was taking, he had talked to his family, and he said he was going to be there for Christmas. He was going to be at their house, his parents' house, for Christmas. And in Mesquite, he decided to pick up some Christmas presents for his brother and his family, just a small Christmas present. And they were able to see it on his receipts. But during this trip, as I said before, and he was talking to his family, he never mentioned to them that he was traveling around and that he was doing all this traveling he was doing. They had no idea this was going on until after he went missing. Now, he ended up in Overton, Nevada, before he turned around and he went back home. And a neighbor saw him come home, but it was only like 30 minutes later before he got back in his car and he took off again and he went on another trip. So on December 13th, he talks to people, friends on the phone, and he told them that he was in Las Vegas. They wanted them to come over to and help him at the church. And he said, well, I'm in Vegas, but I can come back if you want me to. And they said, oh, no, don't worry about it. It's okay. I'll find somebody else. And then he got a couple more calls because I guess he was suspected to be at the church, maybe, because there was more phone calls that asked him if he would lead a sermon, and he said, oh, I was in Vegas. So he said he would come back, but they said it wasn't necessary. So on December 13th, same day we were talking about, he stopped in Henderson, Nevada, and according to grunge.com, it says he parked his car on a residential street, got out, and was recorded on a home security camera in Sun City Anthem, a subdivision, walking with a folder or a portfolio in his hand. And then another camera catches him on Evening Light Street and catches his reflection in the car window. And that's it. That's all. No one saw him again. And then I'll let you look at the video here. Now, on the day he was last seen, they got even more specifics about what happened to him, and I just want to read this to you. It was on Wikipedia, and it's very detailed. So I want to go ahead and share this with you, and you can see it in the map. Around 5 p.m. that day, it pinged a tower at the intersection of Arroyo Grande Boulevard and American Pacific Drive, more than 10 miles northeast of where he had parked. 2 hours after that, it pinged another tower near Henderson's Whitney Ranch subdivision, 2 miles north of the previous ping. Early the next morning, the phone pinged a tower at the interchange between Interstate 515 and US Route 93 and Russell Road, 2 more miles to the north. Now, on his phone, he got a text message from his landlord, and he also used his phone to check his voicemail. And he stayed in that tower vicinity for the next 2 days. He didn't return home. He just stayed right there. Now, the police are thinking that maybe that his phone actually died, and that's why he was shown in that same location. And maybe he drove someplace else, but because the phone didn't have any battery left in it, it still showed him at the previous location. Then on December 14th, he used his phone to check his voicemail. And that was it. That was the last the phone was used. Now, they found Stephen's car at the end of a cul-de-sac on Savannah Springs Avenue. And the police found the window washer flyers in the car, and they found the Christmas presents in the car, but they couldn't find Steve anywhere. And they searched all around the subdivision, but they couldn't find him. He was reported missing. They were able to backtrack who he was and his family, and the family ended up going to that location, and they reported Stephen missing on December 17th. No one ever reported seeing Stephen with anyone. He was traveling alone. Even the surveillance video shows that he's alone. No one can quite figure out why he was doing all these trips and in such a short amount of time. No one has been able to figure this out. Now, there's been rumors that he was doing drugs, but that just was not Stephen. He was not doing that. Just completely forget about that. That was not what was going on. His mother suggested that maybe he was doing some search for ancestries, and he liked to do that. He liked to check on the family history, and maybe he was doing that during these trips that he was taking. But no one really knows for sure what he was doing and why he was doing it. No one knows what the piece of paper was he had in his hand in the video. There was some thought I saw where they thought that maybe he was handing out foreclosures, and I suppose that's a possibility, but that they didn't seem to be able to track back where he had been hired to do this. They had access to his phone records and didn't seem like he didn't make any phone calls to anybody in regard to that, or to a employer in regard to that. So that was pretty much a dead end. No one really knows what was happening and why he was doing all these trips. They thought that maybe he went to Brazil. Stephen had done some work in Brazil through the ministry, and he could speak the language, so they thought, well, maybe he decided to go do that again. But he left all of his personal things behind, even his phone charger. He left that behind, so no one believes that he really did that either. And they have done pretty much all they can on this case. They're just looking for some kind of a lead. Did Stephen decide to start a new life someplace else? I suppose that's a possibility. But why all this traveling beforehand? Maybe he's traveling to see families, and then why at that time? Why would he have gone after he was with his family for Christmas? I don't know. There's so many unknown questions. This is a real mystery that no one really can understand what happened to Stephen, and with all that searching they did. The only thing that I could think of as possible is that maybe something happened at a different location. They did a lot of searching over where the car was found, but maybe Stephen didn't put the car there. Maybe someone else drove the car there and got out of it and went to one of those houses. And the police weren't able to find that information out. I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of, that maybe Stephen ended up someplace else and not in that location. But the police don't know where else to search. But if you think back to this case for 2009, if you happen to be in that area, if you think you remember seeing him, police are still looking for leads. Don't hesitate. Give them a call. Maybe you'll be able to help them figure out what happened to Stephen Koecher. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. See you soon.